Okay, so this is a scene I'm quickly going to illustrate. And there's a couple of things I'm going to mention today to make my job easier or harder, depending on how you look at the things I'm going to use. So when you paint in acrylics, one of the issues is that the paint dries quite quickly, okay? So it means you have to either work with a large brush and get it on the canvas or paper quite quickly, or you can use a couple of things to help the drying time become extended, or if you're going to use water, you can add stuff to make the paint flow but retain the color. So in a nutshell, acrylics are water-based. So when you mix them with water and you start running washes over your paper canvas, the color's going to dull down a bit, okay? So the idea is don't use water, okay? Use paint fairly neat, or you can buy a few things. Now there's things like acrylic mediums, which comes in like a gel form. I don't really use these. Sometimes I get send these things to do a review of, which I've done recently. The thing I prefer to use are things like, so this is a gel retarder. It's not a gel, it's actually a fluid retarder. It normally comes as gel, but I like it as a fluid because then I can put it in a diffuser bottle. And what I can do is, before I start painting, I could either spray the canvas, so there's a little bit of kind of fluid on the canvas, so when I put the color on, it's just going to run a little bit. With all these things, I mean, you're extending it by seconds, okay? It's not hours. You can't then get a little brush out and start fussing. So it's really just a fairly short extension that you're looking at. So that's acrylic retarder in a liquid form. There's also something called flow improver. Again, what I've done is I've just put it in a diffuser bottle so I can spray it. But what you can do is you can get a little bit of water and then spray flow improver in it. And what you will do is you can then use water, but this helps to retain the strength of the color, okay? This is called flow improver. What's that called? It's exactly the same thing. Yeah, but this is slightly more expensive because it's artist quality. The Galleria one is a more student grade quality, but it does the same kind of job. I mean, I don't really use these unless I really want to get the paint running, but uh, yeah, I mean, I tend to compensate by using kind of rich color anyway. Okay, so I'm quickly going to do this. What I want to start off with most paintings, what you want to do is kind of get a quick survey of like what you can do really quickly. So the blues I can block in quite quickly. I can do that at the same time, and then I'll put the sky and the light and the water in. Seems quite simple. I'll use this side to mix the color. All I need to do is make sure the color looks a bit interesting, okay? So it's mainly blue, so I can start off with some blues. Maybe I'll put a tiny bit of green in, tiny bit of ochre, a bit of violet, and a bit of this, it's called Mars Red. So I can try that color out and I'll get a dark blue, okay? It's a bit too dark, so what I'll do is I'll put a bit of white in it and I'll get a slightly lighter version. So that's quite a strong color. So I'll use some of this browny color just to kill the shade off. Again, very, very dark. So we'll just knock that back again with some white. I don't normally use this much white early on, but it's just there's some, this whole foreground is quite light, so let's start this off and just put some color in like so. Now when you're painting water, what tends to happen is when people look at water, they just see the ripples going maybe horizontally. So what you get is this kind of stroke that goes backwards and forwards like that. Don't do that. Just don't do. What you want to do to start off with you want to create some kind of undercurrent. Okay, so you want to make some marks that go in a few different directions, because what that will do is then create some movement as we then at the end start adding the kind of superficial direction of the water, something like that. And again, just get some of these colors going. So we've got a relatively dark shadow underneath here. So I don't mind starting off and letting the brush run a bit. The moment I get a concentrated shape that I need to think about, I'll use slightly thicker paint just to kind of make sure I get a more pronounced version of the color. So that's essentially going to be like the shadow. Again, a bit more white in here. There's a shadow behind. There's obviously going to be a boat sitting on there. And there's some dark shadow behind here. And what I want to do is, it's slightly warmer up there, so I'm just going to add some purple into this color. And the purple will introduce a slightly warmer color. So there's a bit of red in that purple, and then I can add a bit more red. So all of a sudden I get a slightly different color to what I've got there, and I can just put that there like so. Acrylic dries darker, so I've got to compensate as well for the color going a little bit darker. The other thing is I don't want to be neat and tidy about these buildings to start with, so I can just kind of just block in the shape fairly quickly, and then I'll use the sky to kind of refine it a little bit. Just get a slightly stronger blue. I just want some flecks of some slightly lighter variations here and there. And then it can go a little bit darker. So I'm not really too fussed, as you can tell. Because what I don't want to do, I don't want to start thinking about boats. I don't want to start thinking about like the anything, the finite detail. I'm just thinking of just block in some shapes fairly quickly. We've got some lines at the back, maybe a couple of marks there. Okay, so for the boats, they're actually quite a light color. They're obviously light boats. They're in shadow, so I've got to compensate for the fact that they are kind of darker than the background. So we need something like that. But again, maybe just add a couple of other colors in. What I tend to do is, when I look at something, and let's say it's light blue, that's light blue, that's light blue, there's a couple of nuances around there. Obviously, I don't just want to use light blue because it's going to be a bit dull. So I want to use the same brush potentially that I can add different colors to. So something like that, something like that. Again, I just want to change the color up, so I'll put some other colors in there. Some blue. So I'm very conscious of changing some of these shades. I don't necessarily want to follow this exactly because the photo is only going to be as good as the camera or the printing. So I always want to generate something a little bit different. Okay, so something like that. And then the back ones are pretty even, so we can just find a slightly flatter blue here. What's going to lock everything into place is going to be the detail, which is obviously going to be forthcoming. I'm just initially, you always got to look for larger shapes and some blocks there. Just thinking if I can do anything else with this color, maybe add some lighter blues around there, like so. And just where the reflections are, try and do them at the same time. Something like that. Okay, once I've exhausted this color, I really want to look for the sunset-y color, which kind of starts to go a bit red. I might look for the red first. What you've got to be careful of is the warmer colors interfering with these colors. So orange, some white, some yellow, maybe some yellow ochre, just so it doesn't go too bright. I mean, that is bright, but I just use some earthy colors just to knock it back a little bit. Something like that, tiny bit of red. Okay, so that's probably okay. And then maybe in one go, shuffle that along like so. Maybe I can come in a bit more. And while I've got this color, again, real opportunist, just want to look for little peppers of light. Just coming here and there. And then we can find the more yellowy shade. So a bit more yellow, less orange. And that can be brought over quite quickly, like so. Yeah, the moment it starts interfering, it's going to be an issue. Actually, that tree is over there. Silly. Up there. Yeah, so the tree is about there. And again, just some light there, light around there. And I might as well use this in the water as well. So what I want to do here is I kind of want to do something slightly different and mottle the texture a little bit more. So it's not super even. Again, just get some light there. So what I can do when I get to these bits, I can just skim the paint a little bit. And then some little bits around there. And we can just continue this process around here a little bit more. Now, the moment I start coming up to the boats, I'm going to be a little bit more careful. So at this point is where I can look at the direction of the water and just kind of imply the movement a little bit more. So the moment it starts to go a bit greeny, just got to dominate that color on my brush. Something like that. Maybe a couple of little blobs around there, and then more light in the sky. When you look at some of these colors, they're actually a little bit more intricate than what I'm doing. But my aim generally with paintings is just kind of block things in quite quickly, and then you can worry about any nuances after if you need to. Most of the time, you don't really need to. Okay, just some stuff here. We've got kind of like a little bit of a tree, like so. Okay, so back to my blue brush, loads of white in with the blue. And where I've got these gaps, I'm just really looking to fill them in, a bit more white. Just want a starker contrast between the dark. So once I've got this light blue, I can then find, again, quite a relaxed stroke to just to get the movement in here. And I can vary then some of the colors in the foreground. And where the shadow is, I'm just going to use this color to come up close to it so I can just make it make sense a little bit more. This I can block in. And just around here. And again, at the back here, probably just want to just make that edge sing a little bit. Nearly done. So again, where the light blue is, we'll just find some little blobs just here and there. Okay, so at the end, loads of white, back in with the blue. So essentially, at the end is where you bring out the forms a lot more. And I can just sharpen up the hull of the boat over there. And I'll do a similar kind of thing with a slightly darker blue in terms of just finding the top of the boat, bit of a dark window in here. There's a little window. Over there. And this helps to just clarify the edges a little bit more. When you can hold 5 brushes in your hand, you've mastered something. Haven't quite decided what it is yet. A little bit of light, just catching some bits and pieces. And obviously, from this point on, you can then just refine the drawing a little bit more. I'll just do a few more seconds and then I'll let you do your thing. So again, just lighter blue on top of these darker shapes that I started with. And we'll start to pull out the shapes like so, over here. And again, like most of the things I start, at the very end, very strong light. And you can just crystallize some bits and pieces of the scene, depending where you want the eye to go to. Again, just some edges around here, some slightly more sparkly bits in the water, like so. And again, just adjusting things, maybe a slightly stronger red to the back. It just goes on, these things. And I think some marks there. And again, very strong dark, and then you can put the rigging in. If I see a seagull today, I won't be happy, by the way. So just slightly stronger dark in there. And yeah, it just starts to appear in front of your eyes, and you can adjust it as you go. Fairly straightforward, I think, this week. Okay, carry on. Okay.